If only you had been there, my brother need not have died. If only. Martha's cry echoed moments, mere hours later, by her sister Mary. The same words, if only you had been here, my brother need not have died. That is the cry of all of us living bodies with souls, the cry that we have asked the universe, God, Jesus, as we have watched the dying, grieved the dying of a family member, a friend, a mentor, a child, a parent. It's a question that rages against the running out of time, for none of us is ever truly ready for that gaping yaw, that closed tomb, that jar of ashes, that stone placed on the grave. And even we ourselves are rarely ever ready for our own death either. We always want more time. We want more healing. We bargain for a few more years to see the grandchild graduate or married, to settle affairs, to reconcile with the estranged. Whenever death comes, if only crosses our lips through tears. So Jesus, in this gospel story, is quite the problem. He apparently knows that Lazarus, his longtime close friend, is deathly ill, and yet he doesn't do what we'd expect a Jesus to do. He doesn't drop everything. He doesn't fly across the continent or an ocean. He dawdles. He waits. If you had read those intervening verses in that chapter, you'd find him mouthing off religious platitudes, or at least that's what they sound like to the grieving. And only eventually does he show up in a hot country, no less, 4 days late. No wonder Martha is angry. He could have done something. He could have done something, because if you read the previous 10 chapters of John's Gospel, as Mary knew that story, she knew about Jairus' daughter. She knew about the centurion's son. She'd heard about the lame who could now dance, the blind ones whose sight is restored, the long illnesses healed. Her friend Jesus did that all the time. Why not for his friend, her brother? Her cry, if only, is the cry of trust betrayed. How dare he question her faith? But staring at that tombstone, faith is no longer enough. It never is. So I'm asking, Jesus, what do we do with you? What did your words mean? What do they mean? Lazarus will rise again, you said? In the sweet by and by, Martha assumed you meant, but many of us don't. And why would they? Our dead don't walk out of tombs. So does your I am the resurrection and the life, Jesus, what does it mean? What does it mean to the dying, to the dead, or to we the living who grieve? Unlike Mary and Martha, when we ask you if only, our dead do not walk out of tombs. So why is this in our gospel? Is there something you're trying to tell us? Something that we are too bound up in the limitations of data and fact to truly fathom? Some mystery? Perhaps, instead of just listening to you, we should watch you too. So to you folk watching at home, Remember this about John's Gospel of Jesus. The whole book, but most especially this chapter, is anchored in the premise that God, the creator of everything, has chosen to enter into humanity so fully in this person of Jesus, the Son of Mary, God's love made known in flesh and bone, so that whatever we see Jesus doing, that is what God is doing, saying, thinking, feeling. So whatever Jesus says and does is like an icon, a window into the heart of God. So let's replay that story again, this anguished story of human grief. When Jesus finds out that Lazarus is mortal, like all of us, he doesn't push death back for a moment like we would want him to. Instead, he comes right into the messiness of it, the 4 days' deadness of it. Jesus comes then. Martha and Mary and we think it's all over, that there's nothing to be done, that it is too late. But this is the thing about the gospel. For God, for Jesus, it is not too late. Because when Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life, and then carries on to say, those who really live never truly die, we know that in our souls, don't we? Let me try this with you. How many of you, of us, still talk to our dead in the secrecy of our houses? How many of us, in the moments when we most need it, remember their wisdom? How many of us smell lavender and are transported immediately to our grandma's knee? Or find ourselves cooking their favorite food on their birthday, though they've been dead a decade? How many of us watch for the cardinal or see a glimpse of their face in a nephew? Those who truly live never really die, do they? Do you trust this? That was his question. Do you trust this? Moving further into the story, when Jesus weeps with Mary, their hearts in this sad synchronicity, as they stare together and hold their noses against the harsh reality of death, that's when we see in this story that God does hear our grief. Not just hear our grief, but joins in with it with all of the eternal heartache of heaven to accompany our blank, mortal grieving. And then there's that moment, Lazarus, come out, when Jesus talks to the dead as if they are alive. When he does this, and does it in the company of those of us who witness death, and says, unbind him and let him go, what is God saying to us? Are we hearing God's invitation to the dead to live, and for us to live with the freedom of letting them go into eternity? Now I'm left at the end of reading this text and doing my best with it to realize that human words can never fully express what the depths of our hearts and souls perceive in moments of love that outlast death. How can we truly get our heads, our hearts, our guts, our souls around this mystery that God's realm, God's healing, God's love, God's being envelops death and eternity as well as life and mortality, weaving them together into this one eternal now? We humans never fully manage that. But today is the day that we give ourselves permission to try. Through tears, through names spoken again, through candles, through silence entered and song stirred, to unbind our loved ones and set them free into the dance of love that outlasts death, to set them free into the heart of God, and to set them free even for us into the freedom of our memory, knowing that they and we are cradled from birth through death to eternity. Amen.